Welcome back to the newest episode with Brogressive. I'm joined here with my co-host, Ben Bartlett, and we have a very special guest coming back to our show, Milan Singh. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be back.
Always good to have you here. So we're going to do something a little different. It's been a crazy week, and it seems to me like every week has been crazy these past couple months, but you've had a lot of, I don't want to say nonsense, but just war. I mean, literally a war. We've had domestic politics upheavals with the big, beautiful bill, which is not really that beautiful. And you've had a complete political upset in New York City with Zohran Mamdani. Milan, you've worked with the Yale Youth Poll, and obviously you guys polled saying that Cuomo was more likely going to win. And a lot of, well, data that wasn't exactly in line with what we saw. And every pollster was off. It was quite shocking, kind of why we're all here talking about a major upset in New York. So tell us a little about what you saw in the Yale Youth Poll and what we saw in the results.
Right. So when we polled the electorate, we found that Cuomo was leading by 10 in the first round and would win the final round by 14. That didn't happen. We were wrong. Happens sometimes. Sometimes you whiff. We were off by a lot. As a team, we're looking at, the poll, the weights that we used, the sample we had, and trying to figure, okay, how did we get this so far off? At the same time, as you mentioned, I think every poll, save one from Emerson and one from the Progressive, or no, Public Policy, so the PPP in the New York Times collection of New York City polls, had Cuomo winning comfortably. I don't think any poll had Zoran winning in the first round. So, it seems like a lot of people got this wrong, but, there are some theories, it might have been in our case specifically. One possible explanation is we got the weights wrong. We made incorrect assumptions about what the electorate would look like. And if we had made different assumptions, maybe we would have gotten closer. Another possibility is that we got the sample wrong. Maybe we didn't sample some of the people, maybe younger voters who were turning out for Zoran. Third possible explanation is that when we got out of the field on the 22nd, most of our responses we got before the 22nd. It's possible that in the final few days, there was some movement towards Zoran. That's another possible explanation of why we got it wrong. But, I'm super excited to dig into the data nonetheless, figure out what happened, and hopefully share it with people publicly. Other pollsters can just, see, hey, here's what we found that could have gone better for us. And so that the general public can say, hey, here's actually how polling gets made. Here are the decisions and assumptions that you have to make when putting together a poll. And here's how those assumptions can affect your final result and your accuracy.
Yeah, well, I saw in your guys' report on Substack with the poll, I mean, you literally had written, like, if turnout among Cuomo's base does not pick up on Tuesday, he could massively underperform our poll, which seems to be pretty much exactly what happens. Do you think there's any legitimacy to it was 105 degrees on election day heat wave theory and that his base was majority older voters? Do you think that's kind of just a Twitter thing, or do you think that might have actually played a factor?
I mean, I'm sure it was a factor on the margins. So Zachary was during the day monitoring early voting, not early voting, sorry, in-person voting turnout in different boroughs. And he said by the end of the day that it looked like Cuomo got just what he would need. Not a great turnout, but not like a super terrible turnout. And to me, that indicates that Cuomo, some of the some voters who were thought of as being likely Cuomo voters might not have been Cuomo voters. Some of it may have been that Zoran got way bigger turnout in early voting, but I think to some degree it was a persuasion story, or maybe just he did better with certain demographics than was expected. I know some people floated on Twitter the possibility that some of the voters that Cuomo was hoping would put him over the top aren't part of the Democratic coalition anymore. Zoran won precincts on Staten Island. Why did he win precincts on Staten Island? Because the only people who vote in Democratic primaries on Staten Island are super liberal. Everyone else has been a Republican for like a couple decades now. So it's possible that some of the voters who voted for Biden in 2020 and Trump in 2024 and might have voted for Cuomo in 2025 just don't vote in Democratic primaries anymore because they don't think of themselves as Democrats anymore. I think whether that's the case, we'll need some time to do a more in-depth analysis, maybe compare turnout rates at a precinct level, something like that, match that up with precinct level swings in the presidential election. Probably Zach will do some ecological regression. I don't know if his model works. I have to ask him if it's possible with his model, but yeah, so it's a possibility that turnout was a factor. I don't know yet, and Yeah, I wish I had a more definitive answer there.
It's interesting that we raised like the turnout option. Like I think about that one a lot because I can't let this one go. I had a professor who he was like a very ardent like Bernie Sanders supporter, and he would always go on about, oh, if we had a real primary, like we'd have President Sanders right now. If we had a real primary, like Trump wouldn't be president for the second time. And with primary elections, right, they're lower turnout, they're a very different base than a general. And I think a lot about how in Democratic primaries, you have a lot more, I don't know what the word is, but, like younger, more left leaning liberal, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
more of those like Sanders type voters. Or on the opposite side for Republicans, you have, well, people that would pick Ken Paxton over, what was the guy? Wow, I can't remember. Just the generic Republican that's in
Cornet.
Cornyn. Thank you. John Cornyn. Yeah, but that's, I guess, underlying the theme is each part of the primary base picks a very different type of person that is not as electable in the general. Do you think that might have anything to do with it, that this primary electorate was really different than what a general New York City electorate would look like?
I mean, the primary electorate is different. It's a municipal primary in an off year in June, so it's probably lower turnout. I would bet less than 50% of eligible voters turned out. I don't know about eligible, Democratic voters. I think it's a factor. I don't think people are concerned as much with electability in the New York City mayoral primary because it's extremely unlikely Zoran loses a general. I think a lot of it, the story is just that with Paxton, I don't really get it. I haven't looked a ton into that race, but it seems like John Cornyn is like a standard Republican and Ken Paxton is a uniquely corrupt person. I don't know why he's leading. I would guess he'll beat Cornyn. That's kind of not great because he'll probably be a senator after that. But, I think in New York, I think a lot of the story is just like Cuomo is like a bad guy. Like, what is his appeal? What is he promising to do as mayor? I can't think of a single thing besides like calling everyone else anti-Israel and then clearly wanting to get back at people who forced him out of office. He didn't even seem like he wanted to be mayor that much. Zoran had a very clean, very focused message talking about the one thing that people care most about: cost of living, cost of living, cost of living. And I think that is maybe like the how do you say, the quantitative or like polling type reason why Zoran was successful. I think part of it that you can't really capture in a poll is just like he has aura, he has charisma.
Sure.
He's a likable guy. Almost like looked like he didn't want to be at any of the events he was at. Zoran seemed to be having a lot of fun with it. He was bringing positive energy, and I think that really gets left off of the discussion when evaluating candidates, but it's really important, especially for people who, are not listening to podcasts like this all the time.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's interesting comparing it to some of the elections last cycle where some of the APAC money really did win, the Cori Bush race, Jamal Bowman, where APAC doesn't actually spend a lot of money on Israel topics in these races. They would spend money in those races to talk about how they voted against the Biden bill or were against Obama. And I was blown away. I didn't even realize this is how bad the Cuomo campaign was. I didn't even realize that Zoran was like a part of the uncommitted campaign this last election and like seemingly did not
Right.
vote for Kamala. That was, how did you not bring that up once in a Democratic primary in New York? But yeah, that and some of the tweets he had sent, like the fact that he wasn't able to capitalize on this stuff is really a testament to Zoran's campaign and how just poor his Cuomo's was. I mean, I think when it's so low name rack, it is a lot of vibes. It's like, oh, I saw 2 fun
Yeah.
videos of this guy. Maybe I'll go vote for him in the primary. Like I think it's less than a presidential race. You can kind of win on vibes when it's so quick and
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah. I think, Zoran was able to define himself early on
Mm-hmm.
and very well. He seemed relatable. He seems like a guy you could have a conversation with. For example, all those videos of him on the subway. I saw recently the video of him at the halal cart talking
Yeah,
about halalflation
that was great.
and how we have to get the prices down to $8. I was like, oh, that's nice. I'm sure people have seen the clip during the debate where they ask every candidate, where would you go first as mayor? And Cuomo says Israel, and Whitney Tilson says Israel, then Ukraine. And Zoran's the only person to say, I'd stay in New York and focus on cost of living. And I think, I mean, it's not the sixth borough. You're not running for mayor of Tel Aviv. Why are you talking about only Israel in this
I think
race
they were on
as
the wrong
opposed to
side
the
of
actual
Twitter
issues?
is not real life this time. Surprisingly, the Democratic Socialist was on the right side of that this time.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like with that debate, like it's like they're like, oh, we're all talking about Israel. It's like this is a mayoral race for New York City. It felt like one of those things where it's like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
We're here to
Why,
run
why
about
is there
mayor.
foreign policy involved at all?
Yeah, that this
Your
has
job
no
has
bearing.
nothing to do with this.
You're mayor of New York. You're not even a senator. You're not even a congressman. Focus
Yeah,
on New York City. Focus on the subways don't work and people are jumping the turnstiles. Focus on the fact that it's the MTA, right? Focus on the MTA is under a deficit, right? It's under over budget. Doesn't come on time. It's dirty. Focus on that. Focus on the rats. Focus on the cost of living. Focus on the halal inflation, which is that persuasion part that I think Zoran just knocked out of the park, and not just persuasion of things are too damn expensive and it sucks, but things are too damn expensive and instead of, oh, we're going to punish the people who made the things too expensive, here's my solution, and it's a hopeful one, which I think people are really
yeah,
looking forward to. I think this is a playbook of, hey, hold on, wait a minute, none of that pessimism. We can actually fix these things. We can try. We can try a lot of different things because he's got a lot of different proposals. Some
right.
a
Yeah,
little out there, but at least he's
yeah, right.
trying.
It's a hope and change, you might say. Maybe even a yes we can kind of vibe.
I,
Yeah,
I think we're
exactly.
leaving out
But
the real thing that gave him this bump, which was him getting that in abundance endorsement and going on Derek Thompson's podcast. Definitely convinced all the nerds to support him, which I'm sure was enough
yeah,
to win the race. But I,
yeah. I mean,
I, I
look,
did like to see that, even though he was spending the last few days of the campaign doing that, which I do think is interesting that that's something he thinks is a
yeah.
winning message, at least.
I mean, I think personally, I wanted him to win. I'll say. Initially, I was a little skeptical of him because I thought, well, some of his proposals, like the stuff with free buses, transit nerds on Twitter talk about this a lot. Is this a good idea? Is it not? Is it feasible or not? Because I think the state legislature controls funding for the MTA, and the governor said she wasn't interested in raising taxes to finance free buses. At the end of the day, like a couple weeks, not that I don't have a vote. I don't live in New York, but a couple of weeks before the race, I remember thinking, like, look, this Cuomo guy, like, he's everything that is wrong with the Democratic Party. He's old. He's corrupt. He's got mad allegations. He's been governor for 11 years. And because the legislature has so much control over the MTA, taxing, spending, stuff that affects New York City, to the extent there are problems in New York City, a lot of that is on him. Why didn't you fix it during the 11 years you were governor? Seems like mostly you just tried to make Bill de Blasio's life hell because you don't personally like him. Um, you Nepo baby. Your father was governor. You don't seem to want to do the job. You don't seem to live in New York City. You don't seem to like New York City very much. You're running so that you can, and then there are all these Democrats who 4 years ago said, "Oh, you got to resign because of these harassment allegations. You're not fit to be governor, but now you're fit to be mayor."
Bad
That
look.
doesn't make sense. I look. Maybe Zoran gets into office and he fails. Maybe he's not able to get some of his promises done. Maybe the police, go on an unofficial strike like they did in San Francisco. Maybe he's not reelected, but at least he'll try something new and fail in a new way. As opposed to with Cuomo, you get the same old shit that the party's been putting up for years and years and years, and people get tired of it. I was on the phone with my mom this morning talking about this race, and she said, people forget that just because the Republicans are bad, if you're a Democrat, you tell people, oh, they're a threat to democracy. You have to not vote for them. You have to vote for any Democrat, even if they're really shitty. A lot of people are just like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not convinced that you're offering me something better than what they are. And if both candidates suck, I'll just kind of sit out. And people get tired of the same old faces. Part of why Obama did so well is, yeah, you can turn inexperience can be a negative for sure, but it can also be something positive. It's like, hey, you're not part of this system that hasn't
No
worked, or
baggage.
that I feel is frustrating. Exactly. You're something new. And look, maybe if Zoran wins, he'll eventually disappoint. When he's mayor, everyone does. If you don't disappoint someone ever in politics, you probably didn't get much done. But yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm excited to see a fresh face. I think Rebecca Katz had a good point in a New York Times op-ed she published yesterday. Look, is Zoran Mamdani thought the path to winning Arizona? Probably not. Some of those issues don't resonate there. You might want someone with a different style or a different focus, but there are elements of his approach that I think are really key. I think one, being a fresh face, being someone who's, an outsider, not who's worked their way up the Democratic Party ranks for the last 30 years and has clearly just waited their turn for a shot at a statewide office or some prominent position. And being a good, authentic communicator. Like, his social media videos were amazing, amazing. I've not seen a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate, frankly, who's that good at TikTok or Instagram Reels type of content.
Well, it runs in the family with the mom being a director. I thought those were all pretty, the cinematography on those were pretty top tier for election videos. But I totally agree. I think there's hope that he could be this kind of not fully ideological, kind of pragmatic, willing to learn things candidate. But I feel like the most realistic scenario in terms of his like acceptance of the abundance agenda and YIMBY policies is that it works out similar to how California has worked out the last few years after our initial reforms, where a lot of them sounded
Right.
good on paper, but a lot of the everything bagel liberalism, a lot of affordability requirements, prevailing wage provisions that made it so that a lot of these massive reforms we made were actually like never taken up by developers. Now we're actually seeing some changes around that and some secondary bills to fix that. But I saw one quote from him that I saw was going around Twitter a little bit that I thought like kind of made me fearful of that, where he was asked like, why should people in the real estate industry vote for you? And he was talking about the housing crisis. And he said, that means when private developers come to me with a plan that meets our goals around affordability, rent stabilization, union labor, and sustainability, it will be fast-tracked through land use review. So when there's a mystery housing project that somehow pencils, including all of these extreme, pretty hard to reach requirements for a private developer, then it will be fast-tracked through land use review, which is not
Right.
exactly what I want to hear, but at least he has the right end goal. So I'm hoping he gets in
Yeah.
there and kind of maybe he tries to do that and he learns some lessons when it's taken up by about 3 units. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'll take that over Cuomo, who was just a straight up NIMBY and
Yeah.
was
I mean, I will.
concerned
I
about
will.
views and property values. So.
I will say on that topic, one thing David Schleichler once told me is that, I was asking like, what's like the one thing that a state like Connecticut or Massachusetts could do to like, fix these problems with zoning. And he was like, there isn't really one thing. It's always a whack-a-mole. So he said, some of the California stuff you mentioned, he's like, look, you pass one bill and then local groups find a way to get around it. And then you pass another bill. And that's basically how it has to happen. It's not, as you know, I'm sure it's you keep having to chip away at it. The other thing regarding those kind of everything bagel requirements, we did poll this a little bit because we had seen that, both Zoran and Cuomo were maybe not perfectly abundance oriented, but clearly there was, Zoran had a better stance. So we asked people, when the New York City government's built affordable housing, should it A, hire local workers and ensure they're paid good wages, even if this means fewer units are built? B, focus only on building as many affordable units as possible rather than creating good paying construction jobs? Or C, not build affordable housing at all so that neighborhoods can maintain their current character? And a plurality of people, 49%, picked the everything bagel option. 32% picked the abundance option. 10% said no affordable housing. 9% said they weren't sure, had no opinion. Plurality or a majority across all racial groups, all age groups, favored the everything bagel approach. So I think there is yes, there are these NIMBY interests, there, but I think there's a large extent to which many, myself included, abundance enthusiasts don't appreciate that, everything bagelism happens because people want it. Now, maybe it's because they don't have the full information. If they learn more, and, it sounds good, but then when they learn more about the process, they'll realize, oh, wait, this is actually a trade-off, and maybe
Yeah,
we have to make some more complex decisions. I think the fact that only 10% said no new affordable housing does indicate
that
that
was
people.
shocking.
Right, right. Because I thought that would be higher. I thought some people would just be like, no, I don't want it at all. I like the way my block is. So I think people definitely, see housing prices, rent as a problem, but also, either, I don't think it's that most people are like, oh, I'm saying I want all these everything big. This is like a subtle way to block
No.
development without being explicitly NIMBY. I think it sounds good. And then, something my old boss Alyssa told me, like, there's a reason NIMBYism is the status quo. Like, do the people who show up to, HOA meetings, zoning commission meetings, are they perfectly representative? No. But they're not unrepresentative. A lot of people just don't like change, or because they don't believe the change will benefit
I
them.
mean, there's an inherent
And they
trade-off.
do
If
believe,
you lower rental prices, your own property
right,
values are going to go down. That too.
exactly. So, I'm hopeful for Zoran, but yeah, definitely, there's no, unfortunately, silver bullet on how
Well,
to
we
win a
were
shot.
we were texting a little bit off air about that poll
Yeah,
question, and
right.
I'm interested by the idea that it's not so much the like everything bagel as a concept. It's that they want something for them. They want something for the current residents, and that tying it
Mm,
in some way that doesn't make it feel like the benefits are only for like outsiders in the affordable housing, I think makes
right.
it. Also, I kind of feel like
Yeah.
the framing of the question, like that second response almost sounds just like reckless. Like it's like at all costs,
Right.
just build housing. And like, so I feel like
Right.
to someone who doesn't know much about the discourse, it might come off as just like, oh, well, no, I'm sure we should like take the proper steps when we're building. We shouldn't be
Right. Right.
reckless. But
Yeah. That
Well,
that
yeah.
might have been a that's a good point. It could have been the wording because I wrote that question, and I have read the Abundance to book, and like I'm aware that like, oh, more housing, lower prices, but
it's kind of an
a respondent
impossible
might not have
question
made
to
that.
give them the amount of
Yeah.
context of the discourse.
Right.
It'd be real
You'd have to
tough.
basically have a conversation or like do a focus
Yeah,
group or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
It's not like you can explain all of abundance, and it's sad fact that you're the only one of like 5 people on the internet who's actually read it. So it's
It's
a
not a long
kind of a
book. It
problem.
took me like 3 hours.
I'd be curious if you end up doing another question. I saw some people suggesting that it'd be interesting if there was a numeric value attached to it. Like if it was like 70
Mm,
units, but we make it so that whatever, we high paying
mm.
jobs versus 100 units. Like instead
Yeah.
of making them kind of guess what the difference is. I thought that
Yeah.
was
I,
interesting,
I
but
think
that might be a different
I think
question.
that could no. I think that's definitely something we want to revisit in the future. I mean, regardless of people's feelings on abundance, yeah, these ideas have been going around and gaining traction for the last 10 years, and a lot of people in the Democratic Party and some people in the Republican Party believe in them, and it's interesting to get more data on what non-elite actors
Yeah.
think about this stuff, what messages are persuasive to
I
them.
mean, every candidate we've talked to in the last, like, I think the last 5 or so interviews has had some sort of take on abundance. I mean, obviously Zohran did in this election, but it's definitely like permeated to people running for office at the very least, which I think is interesting.
I think the most interesting thing, and I keep raising this, is that abundance is generating all this like controversy within like Democratic elites, right? Like it's like, are you an abundance Democrat? Are you an everything bagel Democrat? Are you like pro housing but anti-developer, and all this little silly little like nonsense that most people are like, I have no fucking clue what you're talking about. And
Yeah,
it's no, right? And it's like, why are we spending all this time bickering about, oh well, it doesn't focus on redistribution or this? Like, God, shut the fuck up. We can
yeah.
we can have a little bit of both.
I
It
mean,
it never said not to.
to be honest, like I think like a lot of the discourse over abundance within the Democratic Party or left of center political enthusiasts, like it's not really about abundance. Like you see people. I saw someone else do a take the other day that said like Ezra Klein is a techno fascist who is like a Nazi, and
Of course.
I was like, I don't think that's true, man. But like, like I think a lot of this stuff is not actually about the ideas and more about like I don't like X person for unrelated reasons. Oh, they support this thing, so
It's
yeah,
like
it's like
angry
high
dog group.
school shit,
Yeah,
which is
it's
like
angry. Yeah,
Well, and I
it's
saw
embarrassing
Derek
because it's kind
Thompson
of,
was talking about that, how kind of lefty people online had a lot of issues with it, but that the actual lefty elected officials were much more willing to listen, and that was saw from I think it was the founder of California YIMBY was saying that was very true in California as well. Like a lot of these state
mm,
representatives who were very like kind of leftist were willing to work with them because they actually have a stake in it. They have to get things
right,
done for their constituents and not just tweet
right.
about
I
it.
mean, yeah, you're trying to get results. You're not trying to get likes on Twitter.
Hmm.
Yeah,
well, and
it's
they
a
live
different
those
game.
experiences.
Yeah.
Did you guys? There was an Ask Crime episode where they had the guy who was in charge of, I want to say it was the infrastructure development, or like for the superstructures, or like maybe it was the broadband implementation,
Hmm.
and he just kept talking about all these layers of process, and they spent 2-3 years, trying to get these things just even out the gate to get people on board. Like they had to get all 50 states to agree to it, and at that point, it's already 2024, and the election's coming up. And it's interesting that all the electeds who have had these problems who are like, hey, we want affordable housing, and then it's this whole everything bagel of, is it environmentally friendly? Is there union labor? Is there this? Is there
Well,
that? There,
on that, California has a huge budget bill. Newsom has actually been pretty awesome on this, where he said, I'm not signing it until you add a massive CEQA exception for infill housing and make it easier to build.
Valid.
And one of the things they did, that they had done some sort of exemption in the past, but it was no one took them up on it because it had like super high prevailing wage provisions that required like 100,000 plus a year salaries for like every construction worker, things like that. And they lowered it to be like it was like, it was still a pretty high wage, but it was more reasonable in all these cities.
It was
Right.
like normal wages for
Yeah,
those
but I
areas.
mean, there was still some standard. It wasn't just up to them. And I saw today that one of the members of the group, some building trade council, said this bill will, quote, compel our workers to be shackled and start singing chain gang songs in response to this
All
bill
right,
that's about
man.
to pass. So it'll be very interesting to follow that. And people, obviously, a little
Yeah,
it's
because
dramatic.
apparently 25 to 30, 38 an hour, apparently that's a bad wage.
That's just
Yeah,
that's kind of a disrespectful comparison to make, in my opinion. Like, come on,
yeah.
man.
Well,
Be
and
fair.
it's interesting watching like, all these bills because I remember when like the Gavin Newsom went on and he talked to Ezra Klein, he's like, "Oh, I like abundance, I like it," and I was like, "Okay, is this lip service? Is it real?" But watching him go to the mat to preserve like Buffy Wicks's what is AB 609, right, and SB 67, like all these pro housing bills. I think one of them was a full CEQA exemption for just housing in general, like not only just infill housing, but something about regular housing. Like if you're going to build units in dense urban areas or rezoning or something like that, you get a CEQA exemption and streamlining all these things. I mean, just a whole litany of bills that this could very well be one of those things that puts a massive dent in the housing crisis. Yet people are coming out against it. I mean, I want to say one of the big environmental groups changed their mind yesterday, uh, and it's kind of embarrassing to watch. Really, it's like, hey, we're actually trying to fix the problem, but now the environmental groups, the developers, the people who are going to make a lot of money off this, are fighting it. Like, what? How did we get here? I just it sometimes that breaks my brain.
Yep.
Yeah.
And well, and people talk about how it's so much more expensive to build the affordable units than it is to build like market rate units. And I've always thought like, oh, like there must be like a complex reason for that. But in the bill, it requires 100% prevailing wages only for 100% affordable projects. And the ones that aren't
Mm,
100% affordable can pay simply the wage floor, which is at least 60% of construction workers have to be paid a wage that exceeds the minimum wage for construction workers or something. Median wage, not minimum.
right.
So that's still a pretty high floor. They're going to get paid more than the average. And for
Right.
some reason, I am genuinely curious why they made it so it's a much more stringent requirement if you're building affordable housing, which I think is basically an admission that this is kind of a government subsidy project for construction workers because that's the stuff
Right.
that would be getting a bunch of federal funds and local funding from affordable projects. So I thought that was interesting. And obviously all this stuff is layers and layers of union labor and different groups wanting different things. And I think that's why Newsom kind of it's easier for him to kind of just push ahead for CEQA reform and more housing because he doesn't have to listen to all of these little groups within the legislature and balance all these interests. But hopefully it works out. I'm paying close attention, rooting for it.
Yeah.
Well, in that same vein, let's go ahead and pivot on over to the big beautiful bill. I know that that was something that Milan brought up to us. It's funny that so for context, he had texted us saying, "Oh, look, I think we should do an episode on this." And I go, "Well, this guy's like one of the smartest people we've had on the show. Like, I'd love to have his takes on these things." And of course, it was a busy week for us. We're actually busy 2 weeks, so now here we are. And as of today, parliamentarian rules that Trump's Medicaid rules and a lot of other little things in the bill are struck. So one of their big cost provisions is was it capping Medicaid taxes and forcing states to bear more of the burden on Medicaid. So something that was going to save money over the 10 years and a couple of little things here and there that's going to pretty much just reduce the savings. So now you've got a lot of fighting about, do they bypass the parliamentarian? How do they bring up these revenues? And well, the answer is they just jammed this piece of shit together and then said, all right, figure it out. So Milan, what are your thoughts on where Big Beautiful Bill sits now, where it was, and where do you think it goes?
So I just read the article you sent before we got on air. I'm glad that the parliamentarian ruled that way. I didn't get to the end of it, so I don't know what the next steps are in the legislative process. I think this bill is some bullshit, personally. If you look at the big picture, what are they trying to do with this bill? They want to extend the tax cuts that they passed in 2017, which primarily benefit very wealthy people, millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires, and large corporations. Look, I like big companies. They make useful stuff. This iPhone's nice. So shout out to Apple. But I think that Tim Cook has enough money, personally. I think Jeff Bezos has enough money. I think Elon has enough money. I don't think that the priority should be cutting taxes for the people who are doing the best in our economy right now, especially not at the expense of the people who are having the toughest luck right now. So they want to extend these tax cuts. They were originally written to last, I think, 10 years, 8 years, something like that. They're expiring automatically unless they pass a new bill. They're writing this bill to extend those tax cuts. And to pay for it, they're going to cut Medicaid, which, for those who don't know, is a joint federal state program, I believe mostly financed by the feds, but I'm not sure. But it's healthcare for poor people. For low income people, if you make below a certain amount, you're eligible for Medicaid. And then they also want to cut food assistance, also known as SNAP or food stamps. Personally, I just think that's wrong. Like from a moral perspective, why are we cutting benefits and aid that goes to the people who are having the hardest time to benefit those who are doing the best? Like, you don't need another yacht. You don't need another mansion. You have enough. You made a good company. You're doing well in business. Keep most of your bread. You earned it. But, you know, the amount that you're being asked to kick back to the rest of us is not that much. And then if you look at it in the big picture, I know Elon talked all about, Doge and saving money and getting the debt down, but they're not even doing that. I think this bill costs 2.5, $2.4 trillion with a T. Trillion is what? How many zeros? 12 zeros? A lot of zeros over 10 years. What's the impact of that going to be? It's going to hurt our economic growth. I think the Yale Budget Lab did some calculations and found that it would reduce economic growth by 1.2% by 2054. It would increase interest rates that we pay on money the government borrows by 1.2%. So we already have a large national debt. If the interest rates go higher, it becomes more expensive. And that means we either have to cut programs further or raise taxes further or both in order to pay our debts. So, like, just from a big picture perspective, we're talking about a bill that hurts our economy in the long run, makes our debt more expensive and unsustainable than it already is, and it's already a pretty big problem, cuts assistance for the needy, all to benefit people who are already doing very well. The other thing I'll say is, look, there's discussion about Medicaid work requirements and SNAP fraud and stuff, but a lot of these benefits, maybe if you're an adult, I'm sure there are some people who commit welfare fraud, but a lot of the people on Medicare are children. A lot of the people who benefit from SNAP are children. Even if the parents maybe haven't always made the best decisions in life and bear some responsibility for their current situation, it's in no way fair to punish kids for that and to put them in that position. So I'm really hoping this bill doesn't pass, and I think it's a real shame that this bill is passing, especially as people all know the Republicans have been doing better with low income voters, with working class voters. I don't think they voted to take their own health care away and give tax cuts to
And
even.
we've seen that in the polling. It's
So I
not
think
very,
it's a
it does not poll very well.
no, but people aren't talking about it because it's. I get it. It's not a sexy topic, but it's a damn important topic. So yeah,
Well,
I think
I
the
think
bill's a damn
something to
shame.
make it sexier is the stupid comments Republican senators keep having. Obviously, we had the Joni Ernst, we're all going to die someday, so who cares if Medicare makes it quicker by cutting it? And then Mitch McConnell said that I know we're hearing from a lot of people back home about Medicaid, but they'll get over it.
When was the last time he
Yeah,
was back?
literally. Well, he probably wouldn't remember at this point if he was. But yeah, I mean, I think it's also like I think my pet issue that I'm almost most annoyed about is the energy stuff, the cuts to all of the IRA subsidies for electric vehicles and charging and stuff. I know personally, I've talked to a lot of people whose parents were like getting new cars, and they were all heavily
Right,
weighing like, oh, there's this great tax credit that is in the new bill that makes it $7,000 if you get an electric vehicle fully. And I know multiple people who took it up on that offer and probably would have gotten a gas powered vehicle otherwise.
right,
And just to remove that when it's
right.
literally, it should be what they're looking for. It's a carrot, not a stick. It's not a tax on gas powered cars or just gas in general. It's let's encourage people to move here by making it better. I mean, it seems like such an obvious solution that I don't
Yeah.
understand why it's.
Or just, the potential cuts to the tax credits for new
Yes.
energy projects, right? Like we talk about all of the above, energy security, that's important stuff, but how are we going to have energy security if people are trying to build a new solar plant or a wind farm or even explore new technologies like new nuclear plants, new designs for that, new geothermal plants? But they were doing this on the assumption that, okay, we have these tax credit programs are going to be around, and there may have been factories that are trying to
Hmm.
build batteries for EVs or for energy storage that have broken ground. And now they're like, well, shit, we had planned to make these investments to build this plant to hire these people in the community, but now we don't know, like
Well,
it's
and the
all up in
rest of
the
the
air.
world's not just going to stop because we were stupid and listened to oil executives. Like they're all going to keep transitioning, and we're just going to
Right,
fall behind until we
yeah.
have a competent president
And
again.
who's got the edge on batteries right now? It's China. does it benefit our country if China owns the entire supply chain for electric vehicles? Like, look, I wouldn't buy an EV right now personally because they're too expensive, and I don't think the reliability is there yet. But eventually, we all know that's going to be the future. Once they work out these issues, which they will, like with any new technology, it'll be the future. Why are we have this chance to compete with China in this industry, and instead we're like shooting ourselves in the foot for what reason exactly?
It
No
feels like
good
the
reason.
Republican position should just be not mandates and instead like letting the market work, but I guess that's too much.
Well, it's an embarrassing because with all of these things that they're cutting, we always talk about how, oh, they're spending now and it's going to cost us in the future, right? They're spending our future right now. And that's never been more true, right? SNAP benefits and all these monies that would have been going to poor kids across this country, poor people, just children in general. Just stick with children. Don't even go with poor people because
Right.
maybe that people are mad about that. But for every dollar we put into children, you get $10 in return.
Yeah.
It's the most simple math out there. There's no reason that you don't put money into kids. You don't put money in the future. Do we want to give China the technology of the future? I know everyone likes to think, oh, well, solar is not that good yet. Oh, well, nuclear is dangerous. It's not. And none of
Yeah.
that's true. Electric cars are the future. It
Yeah.
was the same thing when Ford had came out with their car and people said, oh, well, horse and buggies work fine. Well, guess what? Electric cars are going to be the future. I'm sorry. It's going to happen. So why not try to make it better? Why not try to make it in America?
Yeah.
Why not make batteries the technology of warfare in the future here? Why not allow solar to be everywhere instead of taking away these tax credits? And one of the big ones I think about is Musk and his band of Doge people who, anyways, the loan protection or loan of the LPO that provides the loans for nuclear, you get rid of those upfront loans, those low interest rate loans for big projects like that. They're not going to happen. Banks are not going to say, hey, I'm going to give you a $500 million or $1 billion to build a nuclear factory that will be operational in 10 years. The government can do those things. We can do those long term planning things, but getting rid of that means they will not happen. And it's embarrassing. It is
Yeah.
embarrassing for our climate goals. It's embarrassing for our economic goals. It's embarrassing for the future. It's embarrassing for our tax code. It's embarrassing for inflation. Do we want to just carve out a bunch of debt for a really stupid reason so that someone else can buy a second yacht?
Yeah. And what kind of investment are we, you talked about these investments in clean energy tech and technologies of the future in our kids and, investments in helping our fellow Americans who are not doing as well as others are. But like, what are we spending this on? It's like we're spending this on another tax cut for corporations and for billionaires and for multimillionaires who don't need it, who are already raking in tons of profit. And I just want to return to this Medicaid thing a bit because I know that, folks like us who are highly engaged in politics, we know what Medicaid is at the back of our hand. But to any listeners who are not familiar, again, to be very clear, the Republican position, it's been the Republican position for, I think, as long as I can remember. You guys are a year or two older than me, maybe. Probably for you too. They want to cut health care for poor people to pay for tax cuts for rich people. I remember the animated Robin Hood movie with the animals. That's the opposite of what you're like. I feel like almost anyone understands like this is just completely immoral, and that's why they talk about everything else. That's why they want to talk about, you know, trans people, immigrants, illegal immigration, wokeness, all this other shit because they want to distract from what are they? Is any government law going to change, the culture on wokeness? No, it's a culture. But what are they going to do? What are they going to do with government? They're not making it work for regular people.
They're making it the opposite. They're going to go spend a bunch of money on getting rid of taxes for people who make a hell of a lot more money than you and I do. And before we like to go, oh, well, they're going to cut taxes for me too. I always hear the argument of, oh, cutting taxes is a really easy argument because if I'm getting a little bit more, I don't care if you're getting a lot more. I'm still getting a little bit more. But they're not cutting a little bit more. If you're making under $100,000, which probably about 90% of people listening to this are, if you're under the age of 30 something and you don't own a home, you're probably not making that much. You might get maybe $100 back, maybe 300, maybe 500. The guy making 500,000 is going to get a couple, 12, 15,000, triple that. I mean,
And also, you have to consider with the tariffs as well. Put that into the picture, right? Trump is able. I think there's a law passed in the 70s maybe that lets the president unilaterally set
I
tariff
think it's
rates.
if there's a national
That like
security
Loki does.
concern, so it's all hinged on that.
Right, right, right. Yeah, like that probably is some constitutional issues, but he's put on a lot of tariffs on a lot of different things. If you combine the effect of the tariffs with the effect of this tax bill that we're talking about, I saw a chart about this. I think it was from Yale Budget Lab, but I'm not sure. It was on Twitter. I'll send it to you guys afterwards. But when you combine the effect of tariffs and the tax cut, Everyone outside of the top 10% of income earners will lose money on net. You'll be making less money. You'll have less bread in your pocket after these policies. If you're in the top 10%, great. I think your income goes up like 2%. If you're in the bottom 10%, your income is down like 5 or 7%. That's like significant. So again, like even if we talk about tax, like tariffs are a type of tax, you consider the big picture. 90% of earners are worse off because of this. So it's not even like, oh, we're cutting programs, but maybe some people will save money in the middle class. Like, no, you're also going to be losing.
Absolutely. And I think there is a culture war component to some of this stuff, even though it's ostensibly like budget issues. Like, I legitimately think that a big part of the Trump obsession with coal, it's not just like, oh, he's getting this campaign money from coal people and he's corrupt. I think it's genuinely like, oh, electric vehicles, batteries, that's kind of like a feminized, pussy way to get energy.
Yeah.
Like the real manly men are in the dark, grimy, like pits doing coal with big muscles. Like, I think that's literally what Trump pictures. And I know
Yeah.
this because he talks in that exact weird kind of gay language every time he talks about it. And I legitimately think that's part of it. He wants like the dirty, real work and
Yeah.
is just like has this romanticized vision of these kinds of things. And I think that tracks with a lot of the welfare stuff. It's like, oh, you're a pussy. You need Medicare help. Like, come on, a real man would like,
Yeah. But it's all like, it's people are saying this who are like,
yeah.
hey, rich guys, like, in all the billionaires in the admin who've never, had to do physical work in their lives. Or it's people who, and I get why that can appeal to young people who, maybe are, look, Trump's a funny guy. Some of that shit might be appealing in the moment, but then like, when your brother gets sick, or your sister gets sick, or your mom gets sick, or you get sick, then you understand like, oh, that's why we have Medicaid. Is so you can get like I went on a trip to France after exams I did with some of my boys. And one of them, we went to a bar. He tripped on the way out of the bar, stumbled down some stairs, hit a telephone pole, snapped his collarbone. He had to go to yeah, it's bad. But like we had to go to the hospital, and he was able to get surgery in a foreign country for free. And within 2 days, he was patched up and walking around. And like that makes like that's when you appreciate, oh, like healthcare is important. Like it's great. Like I feel bulletproof most of the time. I'm like 22, in good health for now. But you know, shit happens in life, and that's why we have these insurance programs around. So you're not left like shit. You had a bad day, bad luck. Yeah, now you owe 50,000. Figure out a way to
I
pay.
think Democrats need to be better storytellers in that way. I think like a lot of the stuff we're saying, oh, it's so not sexy, these provisions in bills, but I think telling stories, humanizing it in that way and being like literally pointing to very specific examples and someone who isn't now going to have coverage, like finding these. I think actually Kamala this isn't
Right.
really related, but I thought she did a really good job of that with a lot of the abortion stuff during the
Yeah.
election when she had these very
Yeah.
specific horror stories of red states.
Wasn't it what that woman
Hmm.
from Georgia who had died because she couldn't get the treatment
Yes.
she needed
And
because
that
of
was
the
a real
law?
story. Frankly, at this point, you can make up some hypotheticals that are realistic. Republicans would certainly do the
Yeah.
same. Like, I think you can humanize it.
Yeah. Or you can even point to someone who's like, hey, this is a person who's on Medicaid and
Hmm.
may well lose their insurance because maybe they
Yes.
can't work because they have to take care of a family member, they have a disability or whatnot.
It's awful because the nature of this conversation has now shifted to we're playing defense against the most powerful and wealthy people, against the least powerful and least well off people, and it's as classic as it gets. And the hardest thing is, you can scream at the top of your lungs of how unfair it is, how unjust it is, but I always fear it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah.
People are more concerned about whatever, and that's totally okay. But it doesn't make what they're doing any more right. For all intents and purposes, I hope that it fails. I hope that Senate parliamentarian comes swinging and I don't know,
Well,
maybe comes
the
out
the
a completely different
parliamentarian
bill.
thing
Or,
is so
look,
funny,
they've
though. Do you guys remember like all that discourse around in the Biden administration, the
the
minimum
minimum
wage
wage.
provision?
Yeah.
So, but I saw apparently John Thune is not gonna try to overrule it, but I don't know. It was funny though because they were pointing to the same thing, although like Brianna Joy Gray people were pointing to back in the day, which was like, oh, in 2001 they
Right.
fired the parliamentarian when they didn't like a ruling. So, comes around.
I mean, you can do it, but like, I don't know. I'm hoping that, look, there are 53 Republican senators. I'm hoping that four of them, uh, go back home, listen to their constituents, listen to what they're saying. I mean, we've all seen the videos of Joni Ernst, and I think the junior senator from Kansas,
Which
what's his
Jerry
name?
Moran,
No, Marshall.
the Marshall.
He had a town hall meeting, and like he got booed out because everyone was like, we don't like these Doge cuts to the VA, and like I'm hoping that they go back home, listen to their constituents, and look, like, vote your conscience, vote your district.
Well,
I don't
we've
think your
seen Lisa
district conscience.
Murkowski, I think Susan Collins. I mean, obviously we're used to that pony show.
She
Yeah,
has concerns.
but in the clips I saw, it seemed like she was like pretty strongly at least gonna hold to some of those
She's really concerned
provisions.
now.
So I saw even Josh Hawley was criticizing some of the stuff. I mean, obviously we've seen the show before, but I've hoped that it might get
Right.
Yeah.
watered down a bit.
Well, and supposedly Tom, like Tom, I don't know how you say it, Thom, Thom Tillis in
Tillis?
North Carolina. He had said that if the Medicaid thing didn't get stripped, then there would not be like a senator from North Carolina, like at the like Republican lunch. Which, like, yeah, you know what? If you you're probably not going to be here anyway because again, all the shit you guys have already done. It's a midterm
Yeah.
year. Just remember that. Like, you've already fucked this up as is. And second of
Right.
all, you make a bunch of cuts to all these things. Like, that's going to be really bad. And it feels
Yeah.
like we're just playing like I don't like we're juggling a bunch of balls with, oh well, these people aren't real. It's like, no. You forget there are millions of people across this country that will be
Yeah.
affected. Like, it's easy to get bogged down with the numbers and go, oh well, 8 million people will lose healthcare.
Yeah.
That's all of LA County
Yeah.
losing their healthcare.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
everyone
So
in Los Angeles, a big ass
This
city.
is awful,
yeah.
and I feel wrong even saying this, but I'm not endorsing this thought process. But I do feel like before the election, I saw a lot of people making the point that, like, in relation to maybe even the filibuster and things like that, that Republicans have ran on this kind of shit for years. And it's been so long since they've like successfully passed one of these evil bills, like that's in a very old school Republican cutting spending for poor people to pay for tax cuts for the rich. Obviously, the original tax cuts were a little bit like that. But I think it was so much time that people kind of
Right.
stopped associating the Republican Party with these things that are their
Right.
like main mindset and message. So I do wonder, like, some of these things getting passed. I mean, it would be awful, but is it not like finally vote? Like, the whole dynamic of that voters don't believe it when you tell them
Right.
Republicans' stated policy goals, that they've shown that in polls, that
Right.
maybe this
Right.
is what it taken. Now, Tom Tillis, he's up in 26, right? So Roy
20.
Cooper, like,
Yeah.
maybe this is what it takes to remind, like, maybe this will end up kind of killing that whole shift in low income support for Trump and stuff. I'd be curious if it
Yeah. I
silver
think
lining.
there's look, I think, what did Pelosi say about Obamacare? We got to pass the bill so
Hmm.
people know what's in it. In 2017 they did the tax cuts, but they shelved
Yeah.
the healthcare bill. And so maybe and even then the backlash was
Hmm.
strong towards Trump on the tax cuts alone. But if they actually do both halves, I think a lot of people, who weren't paying attention, like, because maybe, they weren't reading the news, they're busy during the day. It's admittedly a dry topic. Yeah. Then when they, try to go to the doctor, they're like, hey, your card declined. Your Medicaid card doesn't work anymore. You're off the program. Then, people will realize. And, you know, it's not like I want the bill to pass, but it seems like it will pass in one form or another. And I think there will be, I think like people are sleeping on the political ramifications that are going to come from that. I think that probably, I would guess it hasn't shown up in the polling yet because people aren't feeling it yet.
Right. It's going to take until people feel it. It's no different than like inflation, right? Like, you can say people are feeling it, but until it is felt and truly felt, like I always peg like June 2022, right? Like when even like I would go to the grocery store, like again, we're all nerds here, right? We read econ
Yeah.
data, we see, oh, inflation's at 4% this month, but when you go to the grocery store and you're like, shit, like that's really expensive. Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean my bill's this much? Like that's when people feel it. And
Yeah.
when people feel it when they go to their doctor, when they have that disaster, when their brother's sick, their mother's sick, their father, their sister, that's when it'll start to feel. And again, I always go back to this awful I don't want to say like dual nature of these things, but on one hand, you have the people that are going to do it, and they will be okay. The people who are going to cut these things, your Thom Tillis's and all the Republican members, they'll have their health insurance. They'll be fine.
They lose their seats. They'll go to K Street. They'll
Yeah,
be just
exactly.
fine.
But the people that are going to lose their insurance, what about all the people that are not going to be able to afford this? They're going to go bankrupt. They're going to lose their homes. The people that are probably going to die from it, that will not
Yeah.
get the care they need
Long-term
because they
health
can't afford it.
effects because they had to
Exactly.
ration their medicine.
Yep, and it's something we don't have to do. It's like an unenforced error that I can't square that circle. I can't find a way to rationalize how, hey, let's make all these dramatic cuts to benefits, and then we're going to cut taxes on top of it. Let's defeat the purpose of why we need to do these cuts, and then make it worse. Like, in another timeline where bipartisan things are still a thing and polarization isn't, you raise taxes a little bit, you bring the deficit down, or try to like invert it, and you cut spending a little bit, but you make smart targeted cuts and you try to minimize the damage. But That's not what they're doing here. They're raving on about, oh, the deficit, but
Like,
you're going to blow it up.
what's the tweet? The tweet was like, my smart hypothetical right wing critic of foreign aid. Oh, well, yes, foreign aid's important, but it's really not spent optimally, and we could do better. And so I support some reductions. Actual right wing criticism of foreign aid. USAID is gay because AIDS is gay. That's the level of rigor that's coming from, frankly, people who work in the White House.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're ignoring all of their. What was there was I don't know if this was a tweet or like maybe I've read it somewhere. But someone was saying like all these think tanks that were working with the administration, like I believe it was like what IFP and a couple of the ones in, or even Heritage, like they're just sitting in the cuck chair in the White House while
Yeah,
people like God, what's it called, Stephen Miller and all these just
he's
crapulous
also in the
are
cuck
talking.
chair.
Yeah,
And the way we're
the whole
talking
White House.
about like how it'll take time to feel the effects is really just making me so funny to me that it really shows the difference between the two parties. That when Biden passed the IRA and bills like that, we would say the same thing, but we meant it in a positive way, that some of these provisions won't take effect
Right.
until after 2024. Trump might already be in office, but it was all positive. It was like it'll take time for people to feel this new money in their paycheck, this new support from the government. And
Right.
for the Republicans, it's, well, how long is it going to take for people to take notice that they've stripped a bunch of benefits away from you and taken money out of your pocket?
Right.
It really just shows the difference between the two parties. Republicans are hoping people won't feel the effect of their bills, and Democrats are hoping people will feel the effects of their bills.
Right.
It's an awful world we live in. In that
So
case, I
speaking
think
of
we're yeah.
Iran,
Go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. Oh,
speaking of
Iran and
awful
Israel.
Iran, you want to talk about
Yeah.
Iran?
I was going to say I was trying getting ready to segue in there, but Iran and Israel looks like we had our first war in the Middle East in what a couple years. I mean, we did pull off Afghanistan, but technically we had a war
What's
with
like
Iran.
the calendar years since we're in the Middle East?
It's bracket 0. So we struck Iran. Milan, you got any thoughts on that?
Look, I'm not foreign policy is not my specialty. That said, it seems like the nuclear deal that we had that Obama had negotiated in 2015 was working to keep them from getting a weapon. Then Trump tore it up. And a lot of people who supported tearing up the deal said, oh, this doesn't mean we're going to go to war, that we're going to use sanctions, we're going to use other techniques. And a lot of supporters of the deal said, well, it's clear that you guys want to go to war over this. And now it seems like we're inching towards going to war, or definitely more military action. Isn't this Israel's fourth simultaneous war that they're fighting right now? I know they
Something
didn't
like that.
start the one with Hamas, but arguably, I'm not trying to get into that kind of stuff, but just like Hamas attacked first on October 7th. But then they did military strikes in Syria. They did stuff in Lebanon. Yeah, they got rid of Hezbollah for the most part. That's good. But like, why are we starting a war with Iran? To me, we had the deal. Bibi was strongly against the deal. He lobbied Trump to get rid of the deal. He got rid of the deal. He started this war, and he wants us to finish it for him. And I don't think that's in America's interests. I'm sure that's in his interests. I'm sure that's in the Israeli government's interests. I don't think that's in the interests of the United States. I don't think it's what we should be spending our money on. I don't think it's what we should be sending Americans overseas about. And it seems like, unless you go all in, do regime change in Iran, it seems like this incentivizes the Iranian government to pursue a nuclear weapon with more intensity. Like, look at how Iran is treated and
Yeah.
look at how North Korea is treated. Look at how Russia is treated, even, right? Like, even Biden, you know, even the most pro-Ukraine people did not say, oh, we should send boots on the ground. We should authorize American strikes on Russia because Russia has nuclear weapons. So I think it's really unfortunate. I don't think most people want to go to war with Iran. And I've seen polling that says, like, obviously support among Republicans increased after Trump said it or after Trump did the strikes. But like, I really find it hard to see why this is in America's interests. And it makes me very frustrated with the Israeli government for putting us in this position and more frustrated with Trump for allowing himself to be put in this position. Because you're still the American president. You can tell
Yeah.
them no. Figure
Well,
it out
yeah,
on
as
your
much
own.
as Trump has the strongman persona, clearly, like, Netanyahu was not afraid of him because this was something Israel wanted to do for years. And
Of
under
course.
Obama and Biden, even though he had a lot of
Right.
disagreements with both of them, especially Obama, he never was willing to do this because the US government was telling him, like, we're going to be really pissed if you do, and we might not back you up. And Trump, I don't think, was fully aware they were going to do this as much as he claims. Like, I don't think that was something they were hoping for at the time. And he,
Yeah.
for his whole persona, was perceived by them as a weak little bitch who wouldn't do anything if they went against him. And he
Yeah.
hasn't. He's eventually caved and joined because he
Yeah.
felt like they were winning and it would be a good look. But yeah,
I mean,
Well,
like,
and how
if
much of
this,
this is? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, if it I feel like we don't know. Like, there's a wide range of outcomes here. Right? It could be like it's just targeted, like it's a war with Iran, but it's just targeted strikes with planes and drones, and like it's not great, but it's fine. And I'd still say it's not worth it then, because like the risks of Iran pursuing the bomb more aggressively. But the worst case scenario is like we put boots on the ground, and then we have to deal with the same shit we spent like the 2000s and the 2010s dealing with.
Well, right. And I mean, and the hardest part is we're watching like a Middle East kind of spiral out of control. That this has been a long thing coming. I mean, obviously, we're kind of the ones who started this, but it's also a very different Middle East. I always think about 2000 when we go to Iraq, we go to Afghanistan, and it's a very different Middle East. You know, you have Gulf states that are wealthy, that are, I don't want to say modernizing, but that's more or less what they're doing. They're more interested in industry and solar tech and all this other forms of industry. And it's not the same Middle East that we went into in the early 2000s. But the issue is you now have an Israel that's a dominant power and exercising that power. I mean,
Yeah,
and for better or for worse, you know, all of Iran's proxies are pretty much destroyed with the exception of the Houthis,
right.
except Trump went behind Israel's back and made a deal with them saying, like, hey, just stop. Like, I don't want to deal with you guys. Like, please stop shooting our ships. And they're like, all right, fine. If you leave us alone, we'll do it. But Hezbollah is gone. In Syria, you know, the Assad regime is done. Israel's kind of just taking this defensive stance of, hey, we're going to expand into a greater Israel and put defense around, you know, as this whole just expand, almost an expansionary state, but for defensive purposes. And
Right.
really, the only one left standing is Iran. And it seems to me that Netanyahu, in a slippery fish-like politician way, is finding a way to prolong his power to pretty much assume dictatorial and authoritarian power in Israel and continue his war because Gaza is in rubbles.
Yeah.
Bashar al-Assad
What is it?
is
What's the
gone.
death count? 50,000, 60,000 now?
55, I believe. I think they're even pushing into the West Bank now, and it's who's left, right? Now Netanyahu has to come back and go, okay, it's over. Well, now I have to actually deal with domestic things, but it's really easy to be a wartime hero and
Yeah.
a wartime president. It's really hard to be a peacetime president, you know?
Yeah. I think it's, in my opinion, all of this shows that the United States should not be in the Middle East. I think the region's problems are not fixable with more U.S. involvement. I think we should keep like the bare minimum of involvement and, diplomatic relations, of course, with countries in the region so that energy prices are stable. There's no big war that affects the world. But otherwise, I'm like, I don't think we should be allies with a lot of the countries in that region. Like, yeah, Iran is bad. Saudis up until like 5 years ago didn't let women have rights either. Israel, does horrible shit to civilians in Gaza, and they steal people's land in the West Bank. And like no player in this area is really good. To the extent Israel's good, it's because it's like the least has the least destructive government or the least,
Maybe
yeah,
we do the
oppressive
work.
government might be a good word. But I think like, look, this is not in our interests to be there. We should get the hell
And
out.
that used to be the Trump message. That used to be what he was saying. I mean, we even saw some of it.
Yeah. Didn't he literally say during the campaign Kamala will
Yes,
send us to war in Iran?
absolutely.
Or
Absolutely. And
Kamala
we
will
saw
send us
those
to war in the
TikToks
Middle
of people
East?
stupidly being like, me and my bros, like getting on the plane to drop because
Yeah.
Kamala was funny or something. I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah,
now
no,
it's
now
reversed.
you get to
Yeah,
slide for Bibi.
exactly. And that's why I think
And now
the
you get
one
to go
effective thing he
overseas for
had, like, I mean, maybe I'm just reading social media and over indexing it, but I thought these two countries don't know what the fuck they're doing thing actually, like, that
they
resonated
do.
with people. They
No,
like to
that's
hear
that's
that. But that went counter to every single thing he's been doing otherwise, which is getting super involved and acting
yeah.
like we can solve this. So,
Also, didn't he him and Biden, I think it was during the transition, there was a ceasefire
mm,
negotiated between Israel and Hamas, but then it was broken. And then he did like what was it, like the overnight ceasefire with Iran and Israel, but then it was broken as well. Like, I don't know, it just seems like he's not able to, you know, to the like people criticize Biden for not getting ceasefires done. Fair enough. But like he's not able to get it. Like it's almost like we shouldn't have presidents who are like over 75 and
well, I mean, he
clearly
was gonna solve the
beginning to lose
Ukraine
their
Russia
minds.
war on day one, right? And then I saw he
Right,
was asked
right,
about that,
right,
and he was
right,
like,
right.
"Yeah, I mean, no one knew that it was this hard and complicated," which I remember was the same thing he said about repealing Obamacare back in the day. And it's like, well, actually, a lot of people
Yeah,
did know that, and you claimed it was very simple and just took
yeah,
one smart guy named Donald Trump to fix it.
yeah,
And it's just in his mind, like in his never-ending narcissism, he thinks like I can wave a magic wand, I'm president, everyone will listen to me. It's like, but when you spend all this time going, oh well, we're America first, we're dropping like our NATO Article 5
right,
agreement, like we're when you isolate us and you stop being the big kid on the campus like, or on the playground, well, people aren't going to listen to you. Like
right.
you can't have it both ways. And I think the really frustrating thing too is that when we think about like, oh well, Biden did the ceasefire, Biden did the ceasefire, it's like It's two separate countries. Trump is learning that the hard way too, is that you can't just go, I want to ceasefire, stop shooting, and then they just
Yeah.
stop. Like that's not how that works. And also, the war on Gaza was a very different place 2 years ago. In
Yeah.
2023, the first year, pretty much the whole first year until Sinwar was killed, it was a very different war. It is a very different place, and the Middle East and fucking Israelis. Like I don't know if you guys ever read, but like every American president has the fucking problem with the Israelis. Like whether you're Bush Senior, Bush Junior, or Clinton, Obama, Biden, like they love to just do shit that pisses us off. Where it's like, okay, well, we're your closest ally, and we call you our closest ally. Why are you going behind our back? Why are you being this way? Like, it's similar to like the Saudis in the past, and it's like now the other Arab countries are being better allies. I mean, Qatar and Jordan, and yeah, even like Saudi Arabia. It's like they're at least sort of being good friends. Like it's unbelievable, and of course,
I
Trump
think
thinks that he can just wave a magic wand.
it's frustrating. I feel like the Israeli government, like, what did Bill Clinton say? Who's the superpower here, right? Like, you got to remember, like, look, we're the ones giving you money. So you, like, kind of like, look, you want our money and like our alliance. That's fine, but like, okay, then you got to be a good partner and frankly a junior partner because you're this big and we're this big.
Mm-hmm. It's like like a stand down, little bro. Like just remember, like
Yeah, no,
we're the
literally.
United States. Yeah, like we told you stop killing the civilians. You didn't listen. Like at what point are we gonna go? Hey, we told you to
At,
stop.
at a certain
Stop
point,
it.
it's intentional. I saw a quote from the finance minister of the Israeli government who said in the press, "Oh, if it were not for the international community, we want to starve all 2 million Gazans, and we would be right to do so." And that's not like some backbencher. That's the finance minister of the government. Like,
Yeah, it's
come
it's
on,
such
that's
it. Yeah.
intentional.
Well, and it's such a slippery slope out there because you have to deal with pre-October 7th. Like I think what was like 50% of the country was in favor of two state, and like now it's like down to like 12 or like 20 or something like that. And it's like the Middle East is such a fucked up place that anytime you hear an analyst talk about it or anyone who's done these diplomatic meetings, they say like our American and Western ideas of diplomacy in this don't work there. That's just it's a different world, and like I don't know
You
it.
can't
Yeah.
you can't blame an Israeli person for being like, look, after October 7th, I'm not interested in peace. I want security by any means necessary. Like, it's talking to someone about this. It's she told me that Americans often do not understand like how frightened about their own security Israelis
Yeah, when
are.
when you have
Which
alarms that
is
go off every
understandable.
week.
It's
Yeah, when missiles get shot at you every couple of weeks, when like buses randomly blow
right.
up, like that's kind of scary.
And then from the other perspective, you're like a young person in Gaza, you've seen like the IDF blow up your house, killed members of your family, you buried your little sister or something. Like, I'm sure Hamas forces people to join, but like after this, like a lot of people will sign up, like happily, because they'll be like, well, why do I want peace with these guys? They hurt me and the people I care about a lot, and they don't seem to be. And so, like, unfortunately, it just seems like it's hard to see increasingly enough people on both sides of the conflict being of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict being
It's
willing to come
it's never
together
ending.
and say, look, like we have to.
I thought Matt
It's like a
Yglesias
tying a
said like
bowl
a
of
funny
spaghetti.
light about it that I think is very true and obvious, but like that the Middle East is full of intractable problems who's featuring actors whose motives are in part supernatural. And that's true. Like at a certain point, you can't
Yeah,
make all these rational analysis when a part of it is supernatural,
right.
and they are basing it on
Yeah,
that.
or if it's
Yeah,
religiously motivated, if it's like, yeah, like this is like, how do you decide like, okay, my grandfather owned this patch of land, but your grandfather came in and like at a certain point, there's how do you adjudicate whose land it really is? Like, you just can't. You have to find a way to make these people live together in peace, and no compromise is going to make everyone happy. Any compromise will make a lot of people unhappy. But yeah, unfortunately, it seems increasingly like a two-state
well,
solution is out of the
thankfully
picture.
we have such a great president who will work through all these very complex, nuanced issues, and
Put up a
yeah,
gold statue of himself in
sure
the
it'll get
Holy
all
Land.
solved.
I was actually gonna be the one to submit him for the Nobel Peace Prize. By the way, just throwing that out there.
For what? He's only started one more. He hasn't even fixed the
Well,
one to
for
two
putting
he
out the
promised
fire
to
he
fix.
started, it's very
Right.
Well, yeah, I mean he got the old guy out of office, so we owe him a debt of gratitude, right? Because
And all it
he got
took
rid of
was a
CBJ.
new president to start a new war with Iran, actually.
Oh Lord. Well, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. Milan, thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.